One of the great things this book has done is it has brought people back to my life that I haven't talked to in 25 years that
Mm.
saw that I have a book and they said, do you realize you did this for me? Do you realize that you changed my experience, my life at this particular time? And there's nothing more humbling than that. And I also wanted to talk about what is important in mentorship. What are the foundational things that need to be there in order to be successful? And finally, Danielle, I fear for the
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast. So, what if I told you the most transformative moment in your leadership journey came disguised as your worst day? What if the feedback that stung the most was exactly what you needed to hear? Well, on today's episode of Authors on Mission, we are going to be talking to somebody who has kind of cracked the code all about that. Meet Yogi Mueller, former Disney executive, ex-professional comedian, and author of The Great Slapping. He's the founder of Craft Leadership and creator of the Grit Index assessment that's been pretty eye-opening for leaders worldwide. And fun fact, I took the assessment. I scored a 90%, but Yogi has some feedback about that we're going to be chatting about on the episode today. But the thing about Yogi is that he has some amazing ideas, but also uses stories that'll make you laugh and look at the mirror. And pretty much he's here to talk to us about those mentorship moments that change everything. So buckle up and get ready for the conversation. Yogi, welcome to the show.
Danielle, thank you. I am, as I mentioned, I'm extremely excited for this conversation.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
And by the way, I do appreciate the promotion at Disney, by the way. So,
Hey,
not exactly executive status, but I appreciate the vote of confidence.
I don't know. I thought that I saw that somewhere. I'm a big Disney fan, so I got a little excited there. If you don't mind, now that we're talking about it, what was your role then?
Disney's one of those places where you have, it's the largest single site employer in the world with, 35 to 40,000 people, depending on part of the time of the year. And you can do a different job every day of your life. Every year of your life there, never repeat yourself. So I spent a lot of years in operations running, attractions and merchandise locations and custodial teams. But I was also in human resources. I was also in training. I was also in what we call the youth education series, where we taught students from around the world using theme parks as classrooms. So that was a very challenging and interesting time too. So yeah, I did a lot of stuff there.
That's really fun to know. Thanks for clearing that up a little bit. That was very cool stuff. And it's great to know that you went from that to now here you are. You developed the grit assessment and everything else that involved in this book. So I'm wondering if you can just, shine a little light. What exactly was that moment that you would say kind of inspired you to start writing? You've developed this framework. Why put it on the page?
I was my last corporate position. I was VP of talent development. And as I like to tell people, I was freed up to pursue my entrepreneurial dreams by an acquisition. And so I was put in a very interesting position where I had not looked for a job, let alone filled out a resume in 20 years. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. And I wanted to make sure that I was using my time that was provided me in a positive manner and not just hang up the shingle for craft leadership. But I also wanted to put down a paper from a legacy standpoint some of the things that I've learned over these last 40 years. I think I've been in the workplace, right? And one of the things that is not always known to you in the moment, but as you grow, you become very aware of what happened and the investment people had in you. And that's those mentors. That's those people that in the moment shook you by your shoulder and said, what are you doing? You need to fix this. You need to go in this direction. And it might have been such a stark kind of piece of feedback, that you didn't realize the value that it was for you at the time. And so I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to those people that have saw in me more than I saw in myself at that time, saw my potential. I also wanted to acknowledge my mentees because I've had many, many over the years. And one of the great things this book has done is it has brought people back to my life that I haven't talked to in 25 years that
Mm.
saw that I have a book and they said, "Do you realize you did this for me? Do you realize that you changed my experience, my life at this particular time?" And there's nothing more humbling than that. And I also wanted to talk about what is important in mentorship. What are the foundational things that need to be there in order to be successful? And finally, Danielle, I fear for the future of mentorship. I fear for where it's going. I fear for we've got the experienced and the novice kind of going in different directions and not having an interest to get back together and really kind of share that knowledge, that transfer that only experience can provide. So those are the reasons why I put pen to paper.
Great. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a background information to how this all happened. So, during that explanation, you did mention that you're fearful for the current state of mentorship and how it's been developing. In your book, I noticed that you do mention that mentorship should be encouraging, but it's gotten a little soft in how we develop people, which I guess is why you frame this whole book as the Great Slapping. So, I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more information about that. Why is it necessary now for us to change our mentality towards it?
I think there's two factors to that really stand out for me. One is technology, because how the experienced generations communicate can be vastly different than the novice generations in can communicate. And at times I see either an unwillingness or an inability to find a middle ground on that. And when it comes to technology, either they're not willing to bend to learn how to communicate and to engage the other generations, or it's too difficult, it's too complex, and that's what separates. There's no bridge between. I tell a story in the book about a young lady, bright, incredible young woman, and I could be sitting next to her and she would not take her eyes off the ground. But if we were texting to each other, we would have incredible conversations.
Mm.
So there's this divide in how we interact with feedback. Feedback is the second one, but how we just interact with individuals. And one of the most, I think, powerful parts of mentorship is to be able to pick up on those nuances and those inflections and those things that cannot be conveyed in 32 characters or less in a text, in order for you to help the other person grow and to invest in them. The other thing I see has to do with feedback, and it has to do this with, and you mentioned about soft. I think one of the reasons why mentorship has gotten softer, I don't want to say weak, but softer, is because a lot of times in my experience in being a teacher and from middle school through grad school, is feedback often now is seen as an attack. It's not seen as an investment, even though that there may be a genuine interest to invest in that person with some feedback. It's not received well, and so maybe that causes individuals that have the experience to not be eager to meet up with somebody or to join somebody in a mentor relationship, because they don't know how the feedback that they may need to give to help steer this person in the right direction well, right? And so that's why I talk about trust being an important foundation in the mentorship, so you can have those conversations. But I think those are the two things that are diluting, I think that's a great word, that mentorship relationship right now.
Yeah, and you're right. Diluting is a really good way to phrase that. And I understand what you mean completely. People are afraid to hurt each other's feelings these days, I suppose, is what it might boil down to. But hey, that's why your framework works. And it helps people to really just take feedback and criticism with an open mind and use it to improve, which is kind of what all of your questions on your assessment are really geared towards. Perhaps this is a good time for us to transition into that, the assessment itself.
Absolutely, it's the grit index, and I have this tagline: "Embrace the grit." And grit stands for get over yourself, reassess with honesty, invest in improvement, and treasure the lessons and growth. And I think this is foundational for any growth. I use a lot of analogies like if you're finishing a piece of furniture and you're about ready to put that final coat of varnish on, what do you need to do to that piece of furniture? You need to rough it up. You need to take that sandpaper to it and rough out all those edges. And that's the same thing in growth. True growth doesn't happen in calm. It happens in chaos. It happens in friction. And so we want to encourage, at least in my mindset, you need to have that willingness to rough yourself up a little bit in order to take the next step. Socrates says the wise man is the one that knows he knows nothing. I think it was Marissa Meyer that said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I mean, this knowledge, this wisdom has been passed down for centuries, but sometimes people aren't willing to realize, hey, I've got room to grow, and they're resistant, or they are unable to do that. So the grit index really kind of gives us a starting point. So if I'm working with an organization or I'm working with an individual, I like to give them this in assessment first. Where is their ability? Where is their ego? Where is their pushback and their resistance to feedback? If we can get through that and they listen to the feedback, well, how honest are they about what they're being heard? And in every piece of feedback you've ever received, Danielle, in your life, whether you disagreed with it or not, there's always a kernel of truth in that feedback. And your willingness to be able to find what that kernel of truth is important. And then once you have it, if you grew up in the 80s and you watched G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. The other half is doing something about it. And that's where you invest in improvement and taking that feedback and doing something about it. And finally, one of the encouragements to invest in it is you see the value, you see that whether it's you treasure the experience or you treasure the actual growth, and you actually treasure the tough spots. Don't just smell the roses when you find them. Appreciate the thorns too, because that's a part of your entire experience. And so we break that down into 4 mindsets, and we provide a score for those. And that's a starting point for me as a coach or as a consultant to understand where your organization or your individuals or your leaders are, so we can build from that point.
Okay, well, thanks for the background information there. It's good to know exactly where it comes from and what the purpose is. And to anybody listening right now, it's a really quick, simple assessment that, you can just go right on. It's easy to find. And I think it took me maybe like less than 10 minutes or so. Just really easy, but it helps to gauge exactly where you are. So, but you did mention you had some feedback. I'm kind of curious what
I,
exactly.
I did. So Danielle, for your audience, she did really well. She scored a 90%, right? So she is in the true growth zone, right? So in her 4 pillars, her get over yourself was 95%. That's excellent. And that means you as an individual, your ego doesn't get away with feedback. You understand feedback is an investment. Feedback is a gift. Whether you like to hear it or not, it's a gift. That's great. Your reassessment with honesty, 89%, still in that zone of growth. And that means you understand that, hey, you don't know everything and you have opportunities to grow and you're looking forward to growing. Now, here's where your score drops a little bit into the next category down, and that's invest in improvement. So you listen to feedback. You're not resistant to feedback. You understand, hey, there's some positive things. There's some direction I should be taking, but your ability to act on it is lower. And interestingly enough, your treasure the growth score is actually back being very high, 96%. So you're like, hey, I know I'm going to be a better person. I know I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be sharper. I'm going to be better. But you're not doing anything about it. And I'm curious about that. Where do you
No,
think that comes from?
I see what you mean. For me, I think that, whenever somebody does offer feedback or criticism, I know there's more than just a little bit of truth in it. Most of the time, it's completely honest. It's what their perception is. It's not like they're making up the criticism where things, pieces of improvement to make. It's there. So I agree with you when you said that every feedback has truth, which is why I do take it to heart. But I think it's hard to break habits. So if I receive a feedback such as like, um, pay more attention to this, well then, I need to remember to pay attention to it rather than falling back into the same process.
or the same habit. So I think that's probably where it comes from. I'm not sure if that's something you experience with other clients or not.
It is, and a lot of times people come back for with time. I understand it's good, but I just don't have time to do it.
Right.
It's hard work. Like you said, to change a habit.
Right.
That takes effort. Maybe you don't have the patience for it right now. Maybe you've got other priorities in your life, and I think you can always put priorities in place of other priorities. In fact, if you have a lot of priorities, nothing is a priority, and that's another problem. That conversation we could have. But what we would work on. So let's say you took this assessment and then we do a consultation, and I'm like, okay, if this is something you want to work on, if you want to help crack that nut, and you're doing a lot of great work on and really accepting feedback, which honestly, from my experience, that's where most people have the lower scores, getting over that hump. You flew over that hump with flying colors, but you're not allowing you to invest in the payoff that by your score is going to be worthwhile. And so that's the work that you and I would do. And we would dig in to really find out why that effort falls down a little bit when you get into that quadrant.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's good to know that I guess I'm a little bit unique as opposed to some of your other clients because I do get it when people, make the criticisms like you said, but you're right. I mean, it's a matter of commitment, doing the hard work, finding time in the routine to make, those kinds of changes.
Well,
Um,
in the business you're in, Danielle, you probably get feedback and reviews and all the time, and so you understand that that's a part of your gig, right? That's a part of who
yeah,
you are, and if you want to do what you're doing, you got to accept this part. So that's kind of ingrained into the passion that you have.
understood. Yeah, yeah, and so from a professional side, I would say that I do well with implementing feedback. I mean, I'm a ghostwriter, I'm an editor, so every time I'm working with a client, we go through a revision process for every single chapter. So I'm implementing those changes moving forward. I guess what I meant more so when I was answering these questions, I was taking it more in the perspective of personal life, like.
Oh,
Oh, you forgot to, lock the door, like that kind of thing. So, but I see how it all kind of plays a part.
it
And
can.
yeah, and what I think is really incredible about this is that these this assessment really does help you tailor your responses to exactly what your client needs. So that's definitely something that's valuable, and helps you figure out what the slaps would be that you have to give them.
Exactly. And I tell in the book that the mentee needs to bring 51% of the effort. And part of that is being willing to have those tough conversations and know that when a mentor is quote unquote slapping you, it's because they're investing in you. They want to build you up, not tear you down. And if a mentor enters a relationship with a mentee that doesn't like looking in the mirror, it's not going to be a successful relationship.
Yeah. So that being said, if somebody picks up your book and they start to read it, but they feel like they're in a pretty comfortable position with their leadership and everything, what is the first slap then that you'd want them to confront and take on? Because there's always room for improvement. So it would be the first step, you would say.
It would be working on the ego. It
Mm.
would be, why would you plant a tree in soil that would not propagate the growth of the tree? It's a waste of time, money, and effort. And again, that's where that 51% comes in minimally. If I'm working with a leader that, well, I don't know why I'm here. So we would work, and you've probably heard that as well from some folks, is where they think they're infallible or that they've achieved a certain position. But what got you there is not what's going to get you the next step. And so we would sit down and really look at their self accountability, their ability to look in the mirror, their ability to understand that yes, they may be very intelligent, they may be sharp, maybe they built this business from the ground up, but that is not a successful formula if you don't grow from that, if you don't move on from that, if you don't advance from that mindset. And and again, this is why I recommend something like this at the beginning of any type of consultation, because then as the consultant, as the mentor, you know what you're working with and you know where to start. Because if you start already down the road, you're throwing darts at a wall where the board doesn't even exist,
Yeah.
and that's there's no payoff.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good point. And kind of circling back to the first point that you made there is, yeah, I mean, ego is huge and something that you might not even realize is something you're struggling with, which is why your book does a great job of opening people's eyes, I'd say. And kind of using that to transition into the writing aspect of your book. You do tell a lot of great stories that I think resonate with readers and show them, you know what, you do have something to improve upon. Like, look at this example. So, I'm wondering if you could shine a little bit light on the writing process then. How did you choose which stories to include?
That great question. And the book is not just about stories about me being a mentor and doing slapping. It's a lot about I when I got slapped,
Hmm.
some very painful things. And so as I was mentioning that the genesis of this book was the reflection, right, about the people that made a difference in my life. And I write a chapter that one of the things that will help you be a better mentor, a mentee, is understanding that no man is an island. And I know that was very gender specific, but that was how that was written. And we all got to where we are today by the assistance, by the investment, by the lessons learned from other people.
Yeah.
And I go back to, like you were talking about, that CEO that is resistant to feedback. Well, one of the exercises that I would do is kind of reflection. Well, how did you get here? Did you do it on your own? There had to be somebody in your life that gave you that leg up, that invested in you, that thought more of you than you did at your moment. And that moment of humility is powerful. I read about a Brian, a former leader of mine, that took a risk on me that I didn't understand at the time, and I wouldn't found out later that his career was at risk for him putting my investing in me. And when I reflected on that, I'm literally sitting on an airplane at an IRLC crying that this individual that did not know me from Adam risked his professional career because he saw something in me, and that he was the reason why I joined Disney. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would have had that 10-year experience with that organization. That's powerful mojo, Daniel. That's it's humbling, and when you realize the people that you that invested in you without the expectation of payoff, because they may not be around, and I haven't talked to that manager in 30 years. Um, but to know that that was there, incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And that story in particular is very powerful and very moving. Really cool to know the kind of the ripple effect that come with these sort of encounters. So I'm wondering, these are very personal stories, like you mentioned before, about yourself and the struggles you've been through and the feedback you've received. Just from a writer's standpoint, did you have any moments where you thought, "Am I being too honest here?" I'm wondering if you ever thought that, or if you had to push through that, or did you think, you know what, it has to be said. I'm going to go ahead and write it down.
What I had a concern, and I still have this concern, because the people that read it, I ask, that know me. I wanted to have a genuine voice in that book. I wanted that book to be me and my experiences and my learnings. As I mentioned, I think in the first chapter, that I'm not a doctorate of mentorship. I'm not, some clinical psychiatrist that has studied this for 40 years. The only thing I've studied is the experience of being a mentor and a mentee, and seeing the payoffs of that and the investment that brings. Um, no, I want it to be raw. I want it to be real. I wanted it to be uh, impactful, and I hope other people see that impact, because I want to inspire them. I want them to go and ask to be a mentee, or go and be a mentor and share your knowledge. And and if you can't be real with and authentic with the people that you're mentoring, or they're mentoring you, then all hope is lost. So I wanted to make sure that my evangelizing mentorship was as open, as authentic as that relationship should be.
Definitely. So I see what you mean by that. And to all the authors listening, then at the end of the day, we have to think about not, who's going to be reading the story in terms of how they're going to judge or think of you, but more so what they're going to learn from these stories. And, essentially everything you said there was very much needed. And it is all about radical honesty, which is just another thing that you really do seem to emphasize, especially in the grit assessment, at least. So I'm wondering, are there any specific strategies that you use to get people to be honest with yourselves the way that you are honest with yourself?
Well, to answer this question, I might also a little bit answer the last one.
Yes.
I have always on the copy of my desk is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It is one of the greatest tomes ever written. But the key here is not the specific things he tells you to do. It's the concept of being genuine. And especially these days with filters and everything else that you can put on personalities and pictures and voices and AI, I think the most powerful thing you can do in a relationship to immediately build a rapport bridge is be genuine. And mentors need to be genuinely interested in the person that they're talking with, that it does not come across as fake or a veneer or a facade. And it, people, I don't like, but people have told me my superpower is listening. It's because when I'm talking to you, you are the most important person in my world at that time, and I am genuinely interested. I was meeting with a former colleague, and she brought the book for me to sign. And she says, you just always have this ability that people will just open up to you like immediately. Like, and do I have a formula? Have I written that down somewhere? No, but I listen intently with eye contact, and I acknowledge actively what they're saying, and I don't judge. And as a mentor, you can't judge. You can guide, but you can't judge. So if you ask me what the secret is, being genuinely interested and listen intently to what you're talking about.
Well, I can definitely see where that's coming from. Your tone of voice, your mannerisms, your humor, which all do shine through in the book itself, is very present here on this podcast today. So I think anybody
Thank you.
listening can definitely see. So all this being said, I'm wondering, you've wrote this book, you have this amazing framework out there. What's next for you? Are you considering any other books? Branching
I
out?
do. I do. The next one that it's funny, Danielle. This was my first book, and I've learned writing book is a lot like getting a tattoo. I've got a few. Once you have one, you got to have another. So I'm already on the next one. The next one is going to be a little more tongue in cheek, but it is going to have a lesson. It's going to be more of an airplane book, a little more sense of humor, edgy to it. But it's the executive guide to how not to be a dick.
Okay.
And the that word is an acronym, and I break down 4 specific areas that if executives focused on, they will be seen as human and not Mount Olympus automaton. That's a tough word to say in the afternoon. And really creating a persona that brings people in and keeps people in organizations versus chase people away.
Well, I really do like that concept. It has a title that would definitely be eye catching, just like your current title with the word slap mixed in there. So yeah, very cool. I can't wait to hear more about that. And when it's
Thank you.
released, definitely come back on. We'll chat more about that one too. It's always good to have a good repertoire of different books under your name. I can see what you mean by you have one, you can't stop. So
That is true. That is true.
so if people are inspired by what you've been talking about today, they want to learn a little bit more, they want to take the assessment for themselves. I understand that you do have a QR code right there that links directly to your LinkedIn. I'm wondering if there's any other links you'd like to share with everybody today.
Absolutely. You can go to craftleadership.net, and that has direct access to the Grit Index, also to the book, The Great Slapping. And you can leave me information there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and I'd love to connect. I'd love to talk about how we can unlock your potential and help you be better, do more, be more, and truly be the person you're meant to be, or the organization that's meant to be.
All right, well, there you have it, everybody. We're going to put the links in the description box of the podcast today. Or if you're watching the video version of this podcast, just pull out your phone and scan the QR code right there on the screen. Perfect stuff. So now I'm wondering, Yogi, do you have any last bits of advice for the writers listening to this podcast today? Anything that perhaps you wish you knew going into the writing process that other people could probably benefit from? What would you say?
So get a mentor. And I know that sounds circular, but the cosmos has been very kind to me in my journey of writing my first novel. I joined an organization as a consultant, a local networking organization, and they had a mentoring program with there. And I'm like, well, I'm going to sign up because I've never been a consultant before, and I got joined up with an individual who's been a consultant for 30 years. I'm like, this is great. Turns out he also has written like 8 books. His name is Kevin McCarthy. His most famous work is The On Purpose Person, and he became my mentor not just as a consultant, but for writing a book. In fact, so much so that my mentor in writing a book was the guy that wrote the foreword to The Great Slapping. So it's kind of weird how that works together. And then I had another individual that I met that I had worked with Disney 25 years ago that I had an impact on that I really didn't understand the level of impact. Met him inadvertently. And in our conversation, he says, well, I used to run a publishing company. I said, well, I'm writing my first book. He says, edit it and help you publish it. So I had 2 mentors helping me write my book on mentorship. If that's not the perfect definition. So my first is find somebody that's been there, ask them questions, learn from them. That was so helpful. And the hardest thing is putting pen to paper. Once you get that flow, that stream started, it's easy. Writing is sexy, editing is not. It's the last thing I would probably.
Yeah. You did mention that to me. That's right. But hey, it's you do have quite a way with words and making sure that they do resonate in people's minds. So there you have it, everybody. Writing is sexy, editing is hard. So yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a lot of very valuable information for everybody to learn about today. So if you're interested, again, everybody, go ahead and click on over and learn a little bit more about everything Yogi has to offer. And of course, don't forget to check out his amazing book, The Great Slapping. So thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolutely incredible episode.
Danielle, it has been a singular joy. Thank you. You were excellent at what you do, and it has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And to all of our listeners, again, this episode doesn't stop here. Head over to take the Grit Index for yourself. It's not just a feel-good personality quiz. It's going to really show you where you stand and where you are for accepting feedback, on self-reflection, and pretty much just helps you invest in your growth. So again, everybody, listen to more episodes, check out the books. Until next time, keep writing, keep growing, and remember that the best mentors aren't the ones that make you feel good, the ones who make you better. Have a great day, everybody.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.